most ordinary favors. No, they tucked Barry in properly, and she tipped the waitress again, sending her into the night. Once the girl was gone, she searched his luggage and selected several T-shirts of which he was inordinately fond. These she ripped into strips, which she then used to bind his wrists and ankles to the four-poster bed. She debated with herself whether she needed to gag him. He might awaken and start to struggle, and decided it was essential. She disconnected the phone, turned the television on so it would provide a nice steady hum in the background, then helped herself to his passport, Visa card, and all the cash he had. Then, as Barry slept the rather noisy sleep of the dead drunk, she raided the mini-bar: wine, water, cashews. She was neither hungry nor thirsty, but the so-called honor bar was the one thing that Barry was cheap about. "It's the principle," he said, but his indignation had a second-hand feel to it, something passed down by a parent, or perhaps a girlfriend. Moira, she suspected. She opened a chocolate bar, but rejected it. The chocolate wasn't quite right here. They were e-ticketed to Dublin, but that was a simple matter. She used the room connection to go online and never mind the cost, rearranging both their travel plans. Barry was now booked home via Shannon, while she continued on to Dublin, where she had switched hotels, choosing the Marion because it sounded expensive and she wanted Barry to pay. And pay and pay and pay. Call it severance. She wouldn't have taken up with Barry if she hadn't thought he was good for at least 2 years. It had been Barry's plan to send her home, to continue to Dublin without her, where he would succumb to a mounting frenzy of Moira mourning. That's what he had explained in the pub last night, and he still could, of course. But she thought there might be a kernel of shame somewhere inside the man, and once he dealt with the missing passport and the screwed-up airline reservations, he might have the good sense to continue home on the business-class ticket he had offered her. "Yes, I brought you to Ireland only to break up with you, but I am sending you home business class." He was not unfair, not through and through. His primary objective was to be rid of her, as painlessly and guiltlessly as possible, and she had now made that possible. He wouldn't call the police or press charges, or even think to put a stop on the credit card, which she was using only for the hotel and the flight back. Really, she was very fair, honorable even. "Mr. Gardner will be joining me later," she told the clerk at the Marion, pushing the card toward him, and it was accepted without question. "And did you want breakfast included, Mrs. Gardner?" "Yes." She wanted everything included, breakfast and dinner and laundry and facials, if such a thing were available. She wanted to spend as much of Barry's money as possible. She congratulated herself for her cleverness, using the American Express card, which had no limit. She could spend as much as she liked at the hotel, now that the number was on file. It was time, as it turned out, that was harder to spend. For all Barry's faults, a list that was now quite long in her mind, he was a serious and sincere traveler, the kind who made the most of wherever he landed. He was a tourist, in the best sense of the word, a man determined to wring the most experience from travel. While in Galway, they had rented a car and tried to follow Yeats's trail, figuratively and literally, driving south to see his castle and the swans at Coole, driving north to Mayo and his final resting place in the shadow of Ben Bulben. She had surprised Barry with her bits of knowledge about the poet, bits usually gleaned seconds earlier from the guidebook, which she skimmed covertly while pretending to look for places to eat lunch. Skimming was a great skill, much underrated, especially for a girl who was not expected to be anything but decorative. Of course, it had turned out that Yeats's trail was also Moira's. She had been a literature major in college, and she had a penchant for the Irish and a talent, apparently, for making clever literary allusions at the most unlikely moments. On Barry and Moira's infamous trip, which had included not just Ireland, but London and Edinburgh, Moira had treated Barry to a great racketing bit of sex after seeing an experimental production of Macbeth at the festival, one set in a Texas middle school. And while the production came off with mixed results, it somehow inspired a most memorable night with Moira, or so Barry had confided.